I've never been one to read Dame before, and even when I watched or read things related to like the Grand Master of Demonic Cultivation, I thought it was good, but not to a level where I felt it was for me. At a recommendation from my friend, I decided to read out the Scum Villain's Safe Self-Saving System, or Scum Villain for short. I was skeptical about reading it over this story. I felt like it was much more interesting than I thought, though, and I like to show why it was a wonderful romp into the genre of an interesting uh, format called transmigration. For those who have not read Volume 1, please read it and support the work created. Now, on with the review. Liu Bing, in better words, was the exemplary figure to everyone. Having a tragic backstory, unparalleled strength, a huge harem, and the big bad sealed in a jar, yada yada yada. You know how it is. Perfect ending. He was the perfect protagonist and won it all. But isn't that just bullshit? Well, Xin Yun believed it to be after reading thousands of chapters of the proud, immortal demon way. He was pissed and hated the ending, even while sticking with it for such a long time. That is, while reading reviews on the computer, he dies, and then is reborn to the story that he hated as Shin Kun Yu. I love how he hates it. It's a male fantasy story and hates it for those elements, but still reads it to the end. He straight up said he hated the papaya scenes, and I get the feeling those are staples in the stallion novel genre. I couldn't help but be reminded of MDS in reading how he described the main story. It was like that MXTX was already working or thinking about Modi Zushi while writing this. So this could be the reason. It's also possible those tropes are already common in Chinese stories. What drew me into this story right away was the inner workings of Shin's mind and how he was such a great representation of the fans of these types of stories. Now being a part of the story as a pivotal character, being given an assignment of getting into the good graces of Liu Bing, I was humored and chuckled at how Shin couldn't stop complaining and pointing out all the tropes of a normal cultivation story. But that was only the start, for you see, there was an added risk. If Shin were to change any major plot elements, he would be deducted instead of points, and would have to do everything to make the story run the way it should to gain favor points. Strangely, no one else was able to do the same. I guess the hate reading is truly unparalleled for this man. I could not tell if it was supposed to be to sympathize with Liu Bing or want to throw him off a cliff from the descriptions that Shin gave out. It was interesting to see how the newly formed Shin Kung-yi would fare on the outside. He was acting so foul on the inside. It was honestly hilarious how he just kept acting so normal, yet in his mind he was just hating on everything and everyone and acting so snarky. What kept me intrigued was the system, how novel, and I mean this pun intended. The story itself can judge how you can change the plot, almost like a dating sim with its points. When Shin Yun woke up as Yun Ding, or Shin Kung-yi, had a very calm reaction. Normally, if anyone was put in the situation, they'd be freaking out, but he would just roll with it. Just normal. I got isekai'd, or transmigrated. It's enough normal to me. With the Immortal Alliance conference coming up, the reassures Shin that they don't have to off anyone at the conference. Odd, but what is worse is Shin is warned by the system that he may not act out of character, otherwise points be deducted. My theory is this is like the god of this universe, but I wonder why they would care so much about authenticity as much in the first place. He now has to find Liu Bing and must make an effort to make sure the events of the book, from the training to the betrayal, must be as it should be without any failure at all. While Shin was delighted, I felt like he got out of his head with what was to come. It's a common and funny coincidence that the character that Shin Yun took over has the same name, but it's revealed that the complaining main character is pretty well off in the real world. Never have to try, but just live an easy life and things will be your favor. I would say his death was from his carelessness, and that is the opposite to Shin Kung-yi, who has a reputation, skills, and again, no need for money, so both are quite privileged. His becoming the Scum villain is now in his mind, but he can not go about it without meeting Liu Bing due to it being out of character. I love how he tried to help Liu Bing as much as he could without getting points deducted. Most people just kind of accepted that Shin Yu has a key divination and changed personality. He must have been insufferable for them to not even miss the old him, except for a certain person, but that's a spoiler for later. Instead, talking to Ming Feng, who helped him bully Lu Bing and get him for him. I enjoyed Ming Feng's torment. He is punching down a bit on Lu Bing. It's kind of like going back in time to kill baby Hitler at this moment in the story. The game portion of this tries to gain points was intriguing, and how he refers to it as poor writing as the salt. I wouldn't mention how the artwork in this was so good, and seeing quite bruised Lu Bing was quite a bit sad at times, I have to admit. I mean, he thinks it's just a teaching when it's really abuse that's going on here. But this is only the start of the mountain of pain and torment he's going to inflict on the character he hates. I think Shin Yun could be happy being Lu Bing if he transmigrated as the protagonist. I mean, with what he knows, he could get everything in, but suffers a whole lot to reach it. He decides to focus on both unfreezing the system's out of character function and familiarizing it with the way of the world, learning how to fight with a sword, preparing for later using the illustrious Yu Yi's sword. It's not a stretch to say, like in a lot of isekai, transmigration stories have characters gaining OP arsenal quite easily. Shin Kun-gi gets to witness Lu Bing as he has to play the role of a stalker. Kind of a bit perverted if you think about it, how he's just watching these two in the bushes. Interestingly, he never being castrated, because a lot of high-ranking nobles in servitude to the Chinese emperor had to be eunuchs quite often. Ning realizes that Shin is much stronger than most with the deep cut into the ground. Ning trying to stop the bullying did make me feel a bit happier, as Ming Feng has been stunting the cultivation growth of Lu Bing, like it's intended, of course. I started to realize that Shin Yi is more of an observer, how he got his surroundings by Kung Jing Peak disciples, while Ming Feng simps for Ning Ying. Again, the names here. She denies him much and likes the jaded pendant Lu Bing has. Ming Feng decides to bully Lu Bing, and the gang of Kung Jing disciples beat him mercilessly. Ming Feng mocks him by saying it is just a low-quality Gung Ying, and honestly is getting punched by Lu Bing was satisfying, even though Ning asked him to stop the assault. Shin Gung Yi decides to step out of his role of a bystander and intervenes. Again, this could make his points a bit lower in this point. And using a leaf to slice Ming Feng using his spiritual power. I mean, 10 points in the system isn't a lot still, but to put down a bully, in my opinion. I mean, it doesn't help that Ming Feng accuses victims of trying to stab him. Shin Yun-Yi has enough using leads with magic to stop the entire gang, and Ning helps a bloody Lu Bing search for his pendant, even offering to buy a new one. But he doesn't want one, of course. That's his special item, childhood item. When Shin finds he is told to not give it back and decides to keep it for future negotiations, well, Takta gives him 130 points back, and he leaves. Now we get to the Skinner Demon. As the first beginner quest, essentially, I honestly did not care for this villain. Even when Shin took Ming, Ning, and Lu to do it, a new person, Yu Hingyu, comes to tell Shin the original plan was to deal with the problem in Chunghu City. The system does offer a lot for completing the task, and the comment about it being like an RPG of NPC is pretty funny, honestly. The comments alone on how Shin keeps internally roasting caught me off guard at times, like the opposite of a hype man. When he noticed Lu being noticed the cart, you could see already he was conflicted, even putting where Ning shouldn't help to say a man and a woman sharing a horse is inappropriate. A bit good historical context. This was something similar that did happen in Chinese culture. After Xing Yun-Yi learns of two concubines that were alive, he waits for the third with the Skinner Demon lurking about. He has the idea of leaving Ming Feng to greet the older Master Shin and his youngest concubine. Even if Shin is trying to ignore Lu Bing's biggest fan, Ning Ying, is always there, and it's funny how Shin tries to ignore cannon fodder like Ming Feng pretending to sleep. Man does not care for his foolishness one bit. Ming Fan finds a body, and soon enough the Skinner Demon. You can see there was some care for a student, even if he was thrown to his death in the previous novel. It's only when it gets serious when he decides to try to get reinforcements when a kidnapped Lu Bing notices Ning has been kidnapped. Our gracious system decides to offer Shin 100 points in returning to finding Ning. only to lose 50 when they're captured and tied up. While being caught with his pants down, essentially, it reveals to the Shin, the Skinner demon, is a woman named Deer, and is being impersonating victims by donning their skin. I mean, I guess it's a good disguise. Bit gross, but good disguise. Lu Bing could watch his master, and I suspect jealousy of how the Skinner demon strokes Shin's chest. The plan is to reveal that she uses Ning's skin as her own, and soon enough move to Shin Ying. Even then, he feels guilty because he has plot armor, resulting in the demon being smashed by the beam when he tries to attack Lu Bing. Even I question the Deus Ex Machina of this scene, like the main character in this. Technically, he could direct all the damage to Lu Bing because he wouldn't actually get hurt because of his plot armor, but he doesn't. This could cause Lu Bing to hate him later on. While the others are freed, Lu Bing questions his mentor, but is only comforted. Here we learn that Shin Ying now can use the out-of-character function, or extra points, essentially. Like I said before, I did like the Skinner demon a little bit, but not really. I think it was more of a weaker point of these villains of this story. But honestly, it might be just more of a critique of the genre as Shin Ying goes to practice his cultivation. Shin hears someone in pain and uses his ability to learn that the beautiful man, as he puts it, is Lu Yingyi, master of martial arts in the novel. He is Shin Ying's enemy of sorts, and the two talk, even if Lu has a deep hatred for him. This is why the out-of-character function helped, because he helped a bit out of character, but didn't lose the points of this particular moment. It's not really affecting the main plot. After saving him, we have the demon invasion. Again, how the demons seem to be written, especially Xia Huling, who leads the army. Originally a popular female lead, she does show a lot more interesting aspects of her character. For example, how they face off with the 3 strongest warriors instead of an all-out battle. More honorable in this case, and who wins and who loses, instead of creating a massive chaos and murder. All the while, Shin Ying knows that they can win with the power of plot. The battle was alright. I mean, I did like the illustrations, but to me, she looks more older than her age in the picture, although he gains martial arts skills added from the system on his victory. I guess Xia Huling isn't honorable about her defeat, but it shows a lot more out of character how he tells her, "You must win in the future." It was a nice touch. It was then Shin brings out Lu Bing from the crowd to fight. I will mention here that the cultivation itself is not my favorite magic system in fiction. I think it's cool for the martial art aspects, but it feels more soft than anything. How the one-sided fight between Lu of the Clear Sky Hammer looked like a sure defeat. It's flipped on its head, how Shin puts faith in him and he does win after a deadlock. This gained Shin a 500 character progression points on a gamble that could have lost him a whole lot more. However, the demon attacks again, and remembering his poisonous armor, Shin goes in for the slash to finish the creature. However, Shin Ying is supposedly covered in tiny holes from this armor without a cure. Xia Huling is honorable enough to see it's a bit of cute how he goes to save Lu Bing, even when knowing he's already invincible. Lu Bing forgives him for saving him, and they finish their fight with Lu Ying, bless Xia. As they all leave, the poison has already taken effect, and Nielsen attempt to gain favor with Lu Bing. After this whole rigmarole with demon fights, Ming fans are already breaking down and sobbing, asking for forgiveness from Shin. Even after forcing him, he didn't understand him. Both had a meal that Lu Bing masterfully crafted, even making Shin Ying weep. Now he has to figure out how to cure this poison of a mythical 1,000-year-old lotus flower that can save them. At least Shin reflects on how it does in the novel, involving a lot of physical activity. And this is what we call a fuck or die scenario. I love how he refusing to go along with it. It must be a common thing in stallion novels. I mean, it's a great critique how this trope that he'd rather do an impossible quest than going along with it. At least the Shin Ying is content with being poisoned as a scum villain. While the immortal demon conference is coming up, Mu Queen Yun jumps in to take the blame for the invasion, as they keep a secret of the Peak Lord's abilities. At this point, I felt a bit bored with how it was paced around this time. I do know why, but it was nice to see Xia Huling help again. The most interesting part of this part was the dreamscape aspect. Lu Bing Shin got to enter. After exploring the dream world, Shin and Lu talk while the system becomes more argumentative. However, this dream was actually for Ning, but slowly became for Shin, with the illusions becoming more complex and flashbacks of Lu Bing's not so great youth. It felt more like surreal test overall, but it shows the strong bond the two are making, even if Shin keeps denying it. While fighting these illusions, he protects Lu as they break and meet Ming Mo. Again, this is all for Ning, and it's almost like Shin is becoming a nice sub for her. Even as they fighting Ming Mo, it questions Lu Bing's loyalty to his abusive master. We learn he has some relation to demons. Not too far off from Shin's complaint of being overpowered, even when Ming wants to help Lu denies it and Ming Mo is caught. Lu Bing must be pretty traumatized to latch onto Shin Yun as the smallest act of kindness. If you really think about it, other than the washerwoman taking care of him, Shin Yun has been the main person over helping Ning Ying to show him kindness. Ming Mo is probably under the impression that he's still Xing Yu and might be trying to manipulate him. All the while, Shin Yu is caught up in nightmares as a brief interaction with the system shows he's fine. While Lu Bing is contemplating all the demons like Ming Mo should be exterminated. A bit harsh if you ask me for genocide, but I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do, I guess, in that case. But Shin gives him guidance on the nature of good and evil. Even with both being good and bad in this case, there's traces of gray. While the speech overwhelms Lu Bing, he just forces to become stronger, and Shin hopes his demon heritage doesn't influence him. After a long night, Lu Bing plays a housewife and prepares a meal for Shin Yunyi as they pack for the bamboo house. Lu hugs his master as he playfully terms Shizu, as it leads to 50 protagonist satisfaction points. While they continue to feel well the next day, he finally gets a good rest and comes full circle. Lu Bing doesn't want to recognize anyone's master unless it's Shin Yu. And we get a time skip. Years pass and it was quiet with Shin Yu's living life, sparring with Liu Yingyi and reporting to Tu Lingyu. It wasn't until the Immortal Conference comes up and it might know what happens next for Shin. It was honestly pretty interesting how Shin would not eat anything less from Lu Bing. A bit obsessive but sweet, we are now introduced to Xing Yang as he chats with Xin Yunyu. A list is drafted up for disciples you already know. Lu Bing's gonna be in this. The conference wasn't as interesting aside from a couple of scenes, like Shin is physically deteriorating and names that really didn't stick out to me. I mean, it was funny how he asked if Lu Bing was going through a rebellious phase, but this brings up something. How old are Lu and Shin in this difference? Well, apparently he's pretty young compared to Shin. The four Great Six are meeting soon, and the fight against a bunch of demons happened again. Betting is done to see who is when Shin encourages Bing and participates defeating demons for prayer beads. It wasn't around midnight until afterwards where Lu Bing was with the female disciple holding a pearl to the light. Injuries are a dozen, with King Yu and Lu Bing is compared to the Palace Master as his long-lost disciple Zi Yuyan. At this point, Lu Bing must have more plot armor benefits than most shonen protagonists. Even when killing monsters, there is some internal drama with Ying Yang. Again, doesn't really care much for this. It gets interesting at some points with Lu Bing is allowed by the creek and the amount of dead bodies seen by the demon called Nu Yan Chan. As it eats more disciples, Lu fights it, and Shin only watches in horror. He earns points from this system, as Gu Ying is almost falling in love with his heroic actions. It took a magic arrow to take the demon down, as Xing Yu commonly tried to head back and try to act low-key. I can imagine him taking out his fan like an old mom coming to pick up their kids. The damage was minimal, but the mental toll was so strong. Without a cure, started to rear its ugly head, blocking Shin's spiritual energy. It wasn't until meeting a newcomer, Shang Yu Ho, the Peak Lord of Ding Peak, who turns out to be the main culprit of multiple disciples' battering and injuries. It was here that Shin needed justification, pushed Lu Bing into abyss as demons come from the earthquake. Again, the demons per se are not as interesting as I thought. It did make the scene a little bit more harder to read, but at least Shin's internal monologue kept it funny, almost like he's mocking this whole thing, like many others would. The endless abyss opens when it shouldn't have now, but a fight brings out against Shang and Mo Bijun, all ending with a seal that suppresses Lu Bing's demonic bloodline. The penalty for not going with this would be 20,000 points by the system, so Shin tries to go with it, handling Lu Bing. Talking with him, you must get him into the abyss no matter what, unless he wants to lose that many points. Shin hoped he would jump, and it was just clear how he cared for Lu Bing, having to make the sacrifice to striking him down into the abyss as it closed. The reflection of Lu Bing's dying caused devastating emotions in Ming. Ming and most importantly Xin Ying, it was revealed that 140 disciples were lost, which was a great disaster for the Immortal Alliance than we thought. Most heartbreakingly, though, Liu Bing supposedly fell to a demon and his sword shattered. Even when betting is still happening. I mean, like, come on, guys. So many people died from this. Like, Ming Fan suspects there's much more to Liu Bing's death. Doesn't really respect her master in this, so she just doesn't question it. As Ning was crying from the loss, even when Shin gained 10,000 points, he lost it all from this heartbreak of losing someone he truly did care about. The scene really made me want to start to enjoy this series, with the internal turmoil of Shin finally coming to grasp what's happening. As Shang Ying apologizes and talks with the Xing Ying, something is off, slipping about with Moby June. It turns out Shang Ying has transmigrated from the real world into this novel. He was the author, but had a terrible life being transmigrated as an infant. Although Xing Yi seems to have planned to save both of them from the fate of this novel's plot, they travel together for a raid, trying to find a cure for this illness that cannot be cured, for this poison, adding some very interesting topics. I would say the most important that he cannot gain or lose points, now that Liu Bing was in the endless abyss. All the while, a new player, Gong Yo, joins as he's depressed after the conference. They couldn't stop comparing him to Liu Bing, which I think brings up more sour feelings. When they reached the stone cave, I knew danger was lurking, as they found the sun moon mushroom that could cure them this whole time, almost like healing item in a video game. They all head back to Huhan Palace as rumors spread of grief Shin Yu Yi has of students passing. It was nice to see that Shang try to comfort him, even telling him something we have been thinking. To you, he's a character, or is he a ... question? It really hits home how much he actually cares about Liu Bing, even after how much he hated him. You can really tell he wants things to go better for him. He hated the original Xing Yu, and even tried to castrate him. He sees that it's possible for his life to be better, and him to not traumatize as the original novel. How they now think of the poison will now be cured from the mushroom on his way back to the carriage. Well, that's it. Book 1. I enjoyed it when I read it at times. I felt a bit lost. It was hard to care about the antagonist with Xin Ying feeling more like his own enemy. I like how characters reacted though, and mental health was kind of addressed through this story, with a slow burn of how much Shin truly cares for Liu, even if he didn't admit it. It was a much better novel than I expected though, and I really enjoyed it still, nonetheless with all of its flaws. I would even pick up Volume 2 if needed to be. I would give this story more like a 8 out of 10 solid, and I think hope you enjoyed this review, and have a good day.